People think losing your wife at 74 means quiet mornings, long silences, and too much coffee for one. But that's not what hurt the most. What really broke me was how quickly life moved on without her, how fast the house turned cold, how quiet her laughter vanished from the corners. My name's James Washington, and for 48 years Beverly was my world. My wife, my best friend, my peace. We built this house together, brick by brick. Raised 2 kids, Marcus and Lisa, taught them to love hard, work honest, and never forget where they came from. But I guess people forget faster than you think. After the funeral, the house filled with visitors, casseroles, and I'm so sorry's, but a few weeks later, when the last dish was returned and the sympathy cards stopped coming, I noticed something new. The phone started ringing again, but not with condolences, with questions. Dad, what are you going to do with Mom's jewelry? Pop, you still got that savings account, right? That's how it starts. Little questions wrapped in fake concern. At first I brushed it off, thinking they were just trying to help me get organized. But help turned into hints, and hints turned into plans I hadn't agreed to. Lisa started coming by more often, but not to sit and talk. She'd bring brochures for assisted living homes. Dad, you shouldn't be alone out here, she'd say, pretending it was about safety. Marcus, on the other hand, was all charm, dropping by with groceries, mowing the lawn, talking about simplifying my finances. I wanted to believe it was love. I really did. But something about the way they looked at me, not at me, but at the house, the car, the land Beverly and I worked for, it made my stomach turn. Maybe I was just paranoid. Or maybe I finally saw what I didn't want to admit. They weren't checking on me. They were circling what I had left. Weeks passed, and the silence in that house started to feel heavier. I tried to fill it. Old records, TV reruns, church on Sundays. But grief's a tricky thing. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It waits for the quiet moments when you think you're okay. It then hits you like a freight train. I'd catch myself setting 2 plates for dinner, or turning to tell Beverly something, only to remember she wasn't there. And then, just when the silence started to settle in, the kids would show up again, not together, never together. Lisa always came with a list. Dad, have you thought about selling the house? It's too big for you now. She'd say it sweetly, like she was doing me a favor. Marcus was slicker. He'd start with jokes, then slide in questions about my accounts. You ever think about letting me handle the finances, Pop? I could make things easier for you. Easier. That word stuck with me. Easier for who? One night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee, staring at the paperwork. Lisa had left forms for property, transfer and joint accounts. I didn't sign a thing, but I could feel the walls closing in. The way they spoke to me wasn't love anymore. It was strategy. The next Sunday, Marcus stopped by again. He looked around the living room like a man sizing up a sale. "I was sitting on a gold mine, Pop," he said with a grin. I laughed it off, but he wasn't joking. I saw it in his eyes and that hunger. It wasn't about missing Mom. It was about what she left behind. And that night, when I finally sat down in Beverly's old chair, I swear I could almost hear her voice whisper, "They're not here for you, James, not for the right reasons." The mask finally slipped a month later. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just finished paying the property tax bill, something Marcus swore I was too old to handle. He called that afternoon, voice all sugar. "Hey, Pop, mind if Lisa and I come by? Just want to talk some things over." I said sure, thinking maybe they'd come around. They arrived together, which was my first clue something was off. Marcus had that fake grin plastered on. Lisa carried a manila folder. "Dad," she started, "we've been thinking, it's not safe for you here alone. We found a really nice senior community, private, quiet, full of people your age." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "And this is your idea of help?" Marcus chimed in. "It's what Mom would have wanted." I almost laughed. "Your mother wanted me to live in the house we built together," I said. Lisa sighed, sliding the folder across the table. "We already talked to a realtor. The market's strong right now. You could make a good profit." That's when I realized they'd already planned it. Without me. "You went behind my back?" I asked quietly. Marcus shrugged. "We're just trying to protect." You from making bad decisions. My voice shook as I stood. You mean decisions that don't include you two? The room went silent. Then Lisa muttered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Dad, that's when something in me snapped. I looked at both of them and said, "You can't steal what love already left behind." They stared at me like I'd lost it. But I didn't care. Because for the first time, I finally saw them, not as my kids, but as strangers wearing my last name. That night after they left, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I just sat there in Beverly's chair, staring at the empty dining table where they'd dropped their polite smiles like masks at a party. The smell of her old lavender candle still lingered in the air, mixed with the faint scent of rain coming through the open window. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't just grieving, I was angry. Not the loud kind, not the kind that throws things or shouts. This was quiet anger, the kind that burns slow and steady in your chest, sharp enough to keep you awake. I made myself a pot of black coffee and grabbed a notebook from the drawer. If they wanted to play games, I'd keep score. I wrote down dates, details, every lie they'd fed me under the disguise of concern. Too big a house. Dad, too much to handle. Let us take care of you. No. Wasn't ready to be handled. The next morning I drove into town. The bank tellers knew me by name. Beverly and I had our first joint account there 50 years ago. The young man behind the counter smiled politely, probably thinking I was just another retiree checking his balance. "Need to make any changes, Mr. Washington?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I need a new account. Private. No access, no joint signatures, and no online transfers." He hesitated, but I didn't blink. "It's just me now," I told him, "and that's how it'll stay." Afterward, I drove to the small lawyer's office near the church, Carl Henderson, an old friend and one of the few men I still trusted. We sat for hours going through documents, wills, property deeds, even the life insurance Beverly left behind. Carl's voice was calm, steady. "You're smart to act now, James," he said. "People do strange things when money's involved, especially family." I nodded. "I just want to make sure what's ours stays ours." When I got home, I opened the box where Beverly kept her things. Inside were her wedding ring, a few handwritten letters, and an envelope marked "For when I'm gone." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside she'd written, "If they forget who you are, remind them who built it all." I smiled through tears. That night, as the house went quiet and the rain tapped against the window, I whispered to the dark, "Don't worry, Bev. They won't take a damn thing without earning it." It was a warm Thursday evening when they both showed up again, together this time. That alone told me something was off. They never came as a pair unless there was an agenda. I'd just finished watering Beverly's roses when I saw their car pull into the driveway. That shiny black SUV Marcus loved showing off. Lisa stepped out first, crisp white blouse, manila folder clutched tight like a shield. Marcus followed, grinning like he was about to close a deal, not talk to his father. "Hey, Pop," he said, voice smooth as butter. "Got a minute?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and nodded. "Sure. You two finally decided to visit together, huh? What's the occasion?" Lisa gave that polite little smile, the one she used when she wanted to sound kind but stay in control. "Dad, can we come in? We need to talk." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Beverly and I bought 40 years ago. I could still see the scratch marks from when the kids used to do their homework there. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table, while Lisa placed her folder in front of me. "We've been talking," she started carefully, "and we think it's time you start planning for, the future." My stomach sank. "Meaning what?" She hesitated, then opened the folder. "We've been in touch with a lawyer. It's just to make sure you're taken care of. Dad, you've been making some confusing decisions lately. We're worried." Marcus jumped in, trying to sound sympathetic. "You don't have to handle all this paperwork alone, Pop. We can help. Power of attorney, estate management are easy stuff." I stared at them both, the words hitting like slow punches. "You're saying I can't handle my own life?" Lisa's eyes softened, but her tone was sharp. "It's not that. It's just, you're getting older." I let out a dry laugh. "So your solution is to strip away my choices?" Marcus sighed, rubbing his forehead like he was the victim. Pop, we're trying to protect you from bad decisions. That's when I finally saw it, the truth. This wasn't about concern or protection. It was control. Greed dressed up as love. I stood slowly, resting my hands on the table. You think I'm some old fool you can push around? You forget who built this house, who paid for your degrees, who stayed up when you got sick, who buried your mother with his own 2 hands. You think I've lost my mind? Neither spoke. They just stared and caught, embarrassed, but too proud to admit it. Get out, I said quietly. Before I say something I'll regret. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. You'll regret this, old man. You can't handle what's coming. I smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong, son. I already am. They left in silence, and the sound of their car pulling away was the sweetest noise I'd heard in months. After that confrontation, the house felt different, heavier but cleaner somehow. No more fake smiles, no more empty "How are you, Dad" phone calls. Just silence and the ticking of the old clock above the mantel. I sat there that night, lights off, thinking about everything Beverly and I had built. The laughter, the arguments, the years of saving every dime to make sure the kids had a future. And now those same kids were circling like vultures, waiting for me to give up. Well, I wasn't about to. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and pulled out the folder. Carlos, my lawyer friend, had given me weeks ago. Inside were the trust documents Beverly and I had created years earlier, back when life was simple and we trusted our family more than the system. I'd almost forgotten about it. But there it was, signed, notarized, airtight. The house, the land, and everything in my name, already protected under that trust. If they tried to sell the house or touch a dime, they'd hit a wall hard enough to bruise their pride. Still, I wasn't satisfied. People like Marcus don't give up easy. He had that salesman's ego, the kind that doesn't handle losing, so I decided to make my next move quietly. I went to the county clerk's office and requested updated titles. Had the property officially listed under the trust's name again, with Beverly's signature as co-founder. The clerk smiled and said, "Smart move, Mr. Washington. Keeps things clean." I nodded, thinking, yeah, clean and untouchable. That night, I walked through the house with a glass of bourbon in hand. Touching the walls, the old photographs, Beverly's piano. Every creak in the floorboard reminded me of a life we'd earned, not inherited. I looked out the window toward the dark street, and for a second, I thought I saw Marcus's car parked under the streetlight, just sitting there, engine running. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe he was really watching, waiting. Either way, I didn't flinch. I just whispered to myself, "You have no idea who you're dealing with, son." Before going to bed, I wrote a letter, and short, simple, sealed it in an envelope, and hid it inside Beverly's old jewelry box. It started with one line. If you're reading this, it means they finally learned what it means to lose something they don't deserve. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask how they were doing. Let them wonder. Silence is powerful. It makes greedy people nervous. They start imagining you're doing something without them, and in my case, I was. The plan was simple. Let them come to me, because people who feel entitled can't help but expose themselves when they think they're losing control. So I started making small changes. I called the local bank manager, not the tellers, but the guy who's been there since my working days, and asked him to send official letters about estate restructuring. Nothing serious, just enough language to sound important. A week later, I made sure. Marcus saw one sitting on my counter when he dropped by unexpectedly. He noticed, of course. His eyes narrowed, pretending he wasn't curious. "What's all that about, Pop?" he asked casually, nodding toward the envelope. "Oh, just some legal stuff," I said, sipping my coffee. "Carl's been helping me get things in order." I could practically see the gears turning in his head. The next day, Lisa called out of nowhere, her tone sugary sweet, like she was suddenly the world's most caring daughter. "Dad, how are you feeling? Need anything?" I was thinking of coming by. I smiled to myself. "That's thoughtful, honey. But I'm fine." Inside, I was laughing. Hook, line, and sinker. Meanwhile, I started keeping a journal, notes about every visit, every phone call, every manipulative comment they made. Carl said if things ever got ugly, that kind of record could protect me legally. But for me, it was more than that. It was proof that I wasn't crazy, that Beverly's instincts were right. One Friday afternoon, Lisa showed up with grocery bags, pretending to help me around the house apron door. She walked through the place like she owned it, commenting on the furniture, the art, Beverly's piano. "You know, Dad," she said softly, "if something ever happened to you, I'd take good care of this place." I looked her dead in the eye. "That's funny, sweetheart. You said the same thing about your mother's jewelry. And it's been missing ever since." She froze. Color drained from her face. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," I said with a shrug. "Just noticing patterns." She left soon after, angry, pretending to be offended. But I saw fear in her eyes, the kind of fear that comes from realizing you're no longer in control. That night I sat by Beverly's photo again, feeling her calm energy wash over me. "Don't worry, Bev," I whispered. "I'm not done yet. They still think they're playing me, but the game just started." The funny thing about pretending to be weak is how quickly people reveal their strength or their greed. A week after Lisa's visit, Marcus started calling again. He'd leave short voicemails like, "Pop, we need to talk. It's important." I didn't answer. I knew what important meant: money, property, control. They were starting to panic, and panic makes people sloppy. I decided it was time to make my second move. I called Carl, my lawyer, and asked him to stop by. When he arrived, we sat at the kitchen table, with the blinds half closed and a pot of fresh coffee between us. Just two old men plotting peace through paperwork. I told him everything: the manipulation, the threats, the talk about having me declared incompetent. Carl just nodded, taking notes. "We'll protect you legally," he said, "but James, I think it's time you show them you're not a man to be underestimated." That sentence stuck with me. Show them. Not yell, not argue, show. So we drew up a new version of my will, one that split my estate, but not how they'd expect. It included a clause: if either child attempted to pressure, manipulate, or legally challenge me, their inheritance would be revoked entirely. Carl smiled when we finished. It's clean, ironclad, and poetic. The next step was more psychological. I invited both of them over, separate days, separate reasons. For Marcus, I said I wanted help with paperwork. For Lisa, I told her I needed advice about downsizing. I watched them both circle the house like real estate agents, trying to gauge what was left. But when they asked about the papers on the table, I casually said, "Just finalizing some trust details with Carl." Their faces said it all, and panic masked as politeness. After they left, I called Carl again. "They're getting nervous," I told him. "Good," he replied. "Let them sweat." That night, I walked the perimeter of my yard, just like I used to when Beverly was alive. The crickets were loud, the air thick with summer heat, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter. As I stood under the porch light, I noticed something. The mail flag on my box was up. Strange, since I hadn't sent anything. I opened it and found a plain white envelope inside. No name, no stamp, just one sentence on the paper inside. "You think they won't find out?" I stood there under the humming porch light, heart pounding. Whoever sent that knew what was happening, maybe even more than I did. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about that envelope. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Just those 6 words, "You think they won't find out?" It played over and over in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was some kind of prank, but deep down I knew better. People like Marcus and Lisa don't work alone, not when they smell money. The next morning, I walked down the driveway, scanning the street. The same black SUV sat parked across from my house. Engine off, windows tinted. I'd seen it before, a few nights earlier, thought it was just a neighbor's guest, but now it felt different, watching, waiting. I stared right at it, half expecting it to drive off. It didn't, just sat there still as stone. Back inside, I called Carl. "You didn't send anyone to check on me, did you?" "No," he said slowly. "Why?" "Because someone's been watching my house." Carl paused. Then we tightened things up. "Don't open your door to anyone you don't know. And James, keep your head." I hung up and locked the doors, something I hadn't done religiously since Beverly passed. The rest of the day was quiet, but that kind of quiet that hums beneath the skin, unnatural. Around sunset, I went out to water the roses, the same ones Bev planted years ago. The car was gone. I told myself maybe it really was nothing. But as I bent down to turn off the hose, I noticed something under the garden bench. A cigarette butt, still fresh with lipstick on it. Beverly never smoked. Neither did I. My stomach sank. Whoever had been out there wasn't just watching. They were close enough to touch the porch. I went inside, shut the blinds, and poured myself a drink. Maybe Marcus had hired someone, a private investigator or worse. Maybe they were building a case to prove I wasn't mentally sound, if that was the play. They were about to learn I was sharper than they'd ever imagined. I spent the next few days documenting everything. License plates, times, even sounds in the night. I wrote it all in my notebook, every detail, every hunch. If they wanted to paint me as paranoid, fine. I'd let them, right up until I had proof that I wasn't. Then on the third night, around 11 p.m., I heard something. 3 faint knocks at the back door, slow, deliberate. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. Whoever it was didn't knock again. Just waited. When I finally opened the curtain, there was no one there. Just another envelope on the porch. This one read, "They're closer than you think." I didn't sleep that night. Every time the floor creaked, every gust of wind that brushed the house, I felt eyes on me. I sat at the kitchen table. The second envelope open in front of me. The words, "They're closer than you think," burned into my mind. Closer than I think. That could mean anything, or anyone. By sunrise, I'd had enough. I drove straight to Carl's office, the letter in hand. He read it twice, frowning. "Someone's trying to rattle you," he said. "They want you paranoid, second-guessing yourself. That's how they win cases like this." "Cases like what?" I asked. Carl hesitated, like when kids try to prove a parent isn't fit to manage their own assets. The words hit harder than I expected. So that's what this was. Not concern, not family. Just strategy. I thanked Carl and left. But as I walked to my truck, I noticed something odd. Across the street in a silver sedan, someone sat behind the wheel, head down, pretending to scroll on their phone. I looked right at them. They didn't move, didn't even blink. I started the truck, but before I pulled away, I wrote down the license plate number. Back home, I called in a favor. My old friend Harold, retired cop, still had a few strings in the system. "Can you run a plate for me?" I asked. He chuckled. "Are you finally doing something illegal, James?" "Just curious," I said. A few hours later, he called back, his tone different. "That car's registered to a Marcus Washington." I felt the air leave my lungs. My son, my own flesh and blood. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. I sat there for a long time, the anger washing over me like a tide. He'd gone from manipulation to surveillance, all because I wouldn't hand over what he thought he deserved. That evening, I decided to give Marcus what he wanted, or at least let him think I would. I called him, voice calm. "Hey, son, been thinking about our talk. Maybe it's time I start letting go of a few things. You and Lisa should come by this weekend." He hesitated. "Really?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Let's talk face to face. I'll have some papers ready." He took the bait instantly. "You won't regret this, Pop." But he would. When I hung up, I looked at Beverly's picture on the wall. "It's time, Bev," I whispered. "They want a lesson? Let's give them one they'll never forget." That night I pulled out my old briefcase, slid the trust documents inside, and added a single sheet on top, a fake property transfer form. I smiled to myself. If they wanted paperwork, I'd give them plenty to sign. Characters? 2, 985. Tone, emotional, tense, intelligent. Focus, the betrayal becomes clear. Marcus is behind the intimidation. Hook, James sets a trap, inviting both children for a meeting. That's really the start of his revenge. Would you like me to continue with part 11, where Marcus and Saturday came faster than I expected? I woke up early, cleaned the kitchen, and set the table like Beverly used to before family dinners. 3 plates, real silverware, cloth napkins. I wanted everything to look normal, comfortable. That way, when the storm hit, they'd never see it coming. By noon the sun was high. The house smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner, and I was ready. I laid the manila folder on the table, right where they'd see it first thing. Inside was the fake property transfer form I'd drafted the night before, convincing enough to make them believe I was giving them exactly what they wanted. At 12:47 sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to see both of them standing there, Lisa in her usual tailored outfit, Marcus in that smug half-smile he thought hid his arrogance. "Hey, Pop," he said. "You look good." "Feeling better," I replied, stepping aside. "Come on in." They exchanged a quick glance before walking in. I could almost feel their excitement, that greedy, restless energy people get when they think victory's close. We sat at the table, and for a few moments nobody spoke. Just the quiet hum of the ceiling fan and the clink of Lisa's nails, tapping the folder. "So," Marcus finally said, "you've been thinking about the house?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, figured it's time to put things in order. No sense in dragging this out." Lisa leaned forward, trying to sound gentle. "That's good, Dad. We just want to make sure everything's handled right." "I know," I said. "That's why I've already started the paperwork. It's all right there." I pointed to the folder. Marcus grabbed it first, flipping through the pages like a kid on Christmas morning. His grin widened as he scanned the fake form. "This looks official," he said, glancing up. "You're really doing this?" I smiled faintly. "Yep, but I figured we should make it official, with witnesses." Before they could ask what I meant, a knock came at the door. Marcus frowned. "You expecting someone?" "Yeah," I said calmly, walking toward the front hall. "Carl's here, my lawyer." The color drained from both their faces. Carl stepped in, briefcase in hand, expression calm but firm. "Afternoon," he said, giving each of them a polite nod. "I just need a quick signature from both of you to confirm you've received a copy of your father's updated trust." Marcus blinked. "Updated what?" Carl opened the folder, pulling out the real documents this time. "Mr. Washington's trust, the one that clearly states any coercion or manipulation toward him voids your inheritance." Lisa's voice cracked. "What?" Carl smiled politely. "You didn't know. It's been in place since 2016. Your father just wanted to make sure you understood the details." Personally, I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching their faces twist from confusion to panic. "You wanted control," I said softly. "Now you know who's in control." For a moment, no one spoke. The air in that kitchen turned thick enough to choke on. Lisa stared at the papers, her face pale, eyes darting like she was searching for a loophole. Marcus leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, nostrils flaring. I'd seen that look before, back when he was 16 and got caught stealing from Beverly's purse. Same expression, same arrogance, trying to hide shame. "So that's it?" Marcus finally said, voice low and cold. "You call us over here to embarrass us?" I stayed calm. "I called you here to tell you the truth. You've both been circling me like wolves since your mother passed, and I wanted you to know I'm not your prey." Lisa slammed her hands on the table. "We were trying to help you. Help me," I snapped. "You tried to sell the roof over my head, Lisa. You talked to lawyers behind my back, tried to convince a judge I was losing my mind. That's not help. That's betrayal." Marcus shot up from his chair, pacing. "You don't get it, old man. You're sitting on a fortune, and you're too damn stubborn to see it. That house could set us up for life." I stood, meeting his glare. "It already did. It raised you. It fed you. It paid for your college, your cars, your mistakes. And you still want more?" He stepped closer, voice shaking. "You think this is about greed? You've always been selfish, Pop. You loved Mom more than us. Everything was always Beverly this or Beverly that." That hit hard, not because it was true, but because of how cruel it sounded. "She was the best part of this family," I said quietly. "And maybe if you'd paid attention, you would have learned what that meant." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Carl stayed quiet, his eyes moving between us. Then Marcus leaned in, whispering like poison, "You won't live forever. And when you're gone, that trust won't matter." I smiled slowly. "You're right. I won't live forever. But what you don't know, son, is that not everything I've built is in this house." He froze. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I just picked up Beverly's old locket from the counter and slipped it into my pocket. You'll figure it out when it's time. Marcus's face twisted with rage. You think you're clever, old man. Keep your secrets. But when the time comes, I'll get what's mine. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the glass. Lisa followed, tears streaking her makeup, but she didn't look back. When the sound of their car faded, Carl sighed. You sure you want to keep playing this game, James? It could get ugly. I looked at the empty chairs, the untouched coffee, the quiet walls. It already is, I said softly, but I'm not the one who started it. After that day, the calls stopped. No messages, no texts, not even a fake check-in. Just silence, the kind that hums under your skin and tells you something's coming. Carl said to let things cool off, but I knew better. My son wasn't the type to walk away. He was the type to plot. For a few weeks, everything seemed normal. I worked in the garden, went to church, even started talking again to my neighbor. Mrs. Harris. She brought over pies and gossip, pretending not to worry about the old man next door. But at night, I'd catch headlights passing slow in front of my house, the same black SUV idling at the corner, the same feeling of being watched. Every instinct in me screamed it was Marcus. Then one afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and found the front door slightly open. My gut dropped. I stepped inside, slow and quiet. The air felt off, the way it does when you know someone's been where they shouldn't. Nothing looked stolen, but drawers were open, papers scattered. On the table sat a photo of Beverly and me, face down. That was no accident. I called Carl right away. You were right, I said. He's crossed the line. Who do you want me to call the police? He asked. I hesitated. Marcus was still my son. Blood or not, that word still meant something. Not yet, I said. Let's give him one last chance to do the right thing. That night I called him. He picked up on the second ring. What do you want, Pop? His tone was flat, cold. I know you were here, I said. If you ever come into my house again uninvited, I'll make sure you regret it. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. You think anyone's going to believe you? You're just a lonely old man losing his mind. His words cut deep, but my voice stayed calm. Maybe, but even an old man can still protect what's his. He hung up. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get worse. I double-locked the doors, set up a small camera by the porch, an old one Beverly used to film birthdays. It wasn't much, but it gave me some peace. 2 nights later, the camera caught movement, someone walking through the yard, flashlight in hand, heading straight for the shed. The figure wasn't clear, but the way he moved, the way he kicked the dirt, I didn't need a close-up. I knew it was Marcus. I didn't call him. I didn't shout. I just watched, let him dig his own hole. Because the next morning, when the cops knocked on his door with Carl's footage in hand, it wouldn't be me explaining anything, it would be him. The footage was clear enough. A tall man in a hoodie, moving like he belonged there. The timestamp matched the night I'd heard noises by the shed. Carl didn't waste time. He took it straight to the local police, told them everything. They promised to look into it, but I could tell by their tone they already knew who it was. Small town, familiar name. They'd probably known Marcus since he was a kid. 2 days later, I was sitting on the porch when a patrol car rolled up the driveway. The officer stepped out, young but serious. Mr. Washington? I nodded. We found your son, he said. He's not in trouble yet, but he needs to stay away from your property. We advised him accordingly. I felt something twist in my chest. Not satisfaction, not relief, just sadness. Did he say anything? I asked. The officer nodded. He said you're confused, that he was just checking on you. I laughed under my breath. Yeah, he's always been good with words. When the officer left, the quiet came back heavier than before. I walked to the shed. The door hung half open, the padlock busted. Inside, boxes were scattered and old tools, photo albums, a few of Beverly's keepsakes, but nothing was missing. Not really. He hadn't come to steal. He'd come to look. For what, I didn't know. Maybe for proof I was hiding money, or maybe something deeper. Maybe he was just looking for control again. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Beverly's picture. You'd hate this, Bev, I whispered. You'd tell me to forgive him. But forgiveness felt like a language I'd forgotten. Around 10 p.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. "Dad?" the voice said. "Marcus?" He sounded smaller. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stayed quiet. I thought you were cutting me out. I didn't know about the trust, the lawyer, any of it. I just wanted to take what isn't yours?" I interrupted. He sighed. "No, I just wanted to feel like I mattered again." For the first time I heard it, the crack in his voice, the boy he used to be hiding inside the man he'd become. "You matter, son," I said softly. "But love doesn't come with a price tag. You sold your share of it when you chose greed." Silence, then a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Pop." I closed my eyes. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself a change." He hung up without another word. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the phone, wondering if that was the last conversation we'd ever have. The morning after that call, the air felt different, lighter somehow. The house was still quiet, but not the same kind of quiet that used to suffocate me. This was peace. The storm had passed. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun climb over the trees Beverly used to love so much. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel afraid. I just felt done. A few days later, I met Carl one last time. We finalized everything. The trust, the will, the property deeds, everything locked tight, clean, simple. When we finished, he looked at me and smiled. "You did the right thing, James. You stood your ground." "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't feel like winning." He nodded. "That's because you're a good man. Good men never feel good about protecting themselves from family." I thought about that the whole drive home. Maybe he was right. Maybe victory doesn't always come with a smile. Sometimes it's just peace, the kind you earn after losing almost everything else. When I got home, I walked through each room slowly, touching the things Beverly and I built together, the kitchen table with its old scratches, the photos on the wall, her piano by the window. Every object told a story, and every story led back to love. That night, I wrote one final entry in my notebook, the same one I'd been using to document everything. I wrote, "Greed can take a lot from you, but it can't touch what's real. Love, integrity, peace, those things survive the storm." I tucked the notebook inside the jewelry box where Beverly's locket still rested. Then I poured a glass of bourbon, stepped out onto the porch, and sat under the stars. The air smelled like rain, and somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, that lonely sound that reminds you life keeps moving, even after heartbreak. I thought about Marcus and Lisa. I hadn't heard from either since that last call, but I hoped they were okay. Maybe time would humble them. Maybe it wouldn't. Either way, they'd learn. You can't build happiness on someone else's pain. Before I went inside, I looked up at the night sky and whispered, "We did it, Bev, you and me. We protected what mattered." And for the first time since she'd been gone, I could almost swear I heard her laugh in the breeze, soft, gentle, proud. Weeks passed. The calls never came, but the silence no longer stung. I'd wake up before sunrise, make coffee, and watch the light crawl across the living room wall like time itself was apologizing for moving too fast. The world hadn't changed much, just me. I'd learned that losing people isn't the end. Sometimes it's the only way to find peace. The neighbors still waved when I mowed the lawn. The mail still came at 10. But every once in a while, I'd catch sight of a car slowing down near the end of the driveway. Not Marcus's black SUV anymore, just strangers. Curious about the old Washington house that everyone in town whispered about. "That's the man who took on his own kids," they'd say. Protected everything and still forgave him. I'd smile when I overheard it. Not out of pride, but because they never really understood the story. It wasn't about money. It was about memory, and keeping what love built from being rewritten by greed. One evening I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photo. The picture showed Marcus holding his own newborn son, Lisa standing beside him, both smiling awkwardly, almost shy. On the paper were 4 words, "We're trying again, Dad." My throat tightened. I didn't cry. Men like me save our tears for graves, but I felt something heavy lift off my chest. Maybe redemption doesn't always knock loud. Maybe it just slips a note in your mailbox when you least expect it. I walked out to the porch, sat in Beverly's old rocking chair, and stared at that photo until the stars came out. Somewhere out there, my children were building a second chance, and maybe, just maybe, the cycle of taking and hurting had finally broken. I whispered into the night, "Make her proud, kids." That's all I ever wanted. The wind stirred the chimes Beverly hung decades ago, and they sang softly in the dark, like her laughter drifting home. And as I sat there, the same thought kept circling my mind. Every story ends, but some truths keep echoing long after the final word. A month after that letter, the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt lived in, like the walls were finally breathing again. I'd fixed the porch railing, painted the mailbox, even started planting tomatoes out back. Funny how a man can rebuild his world one small thing at a time. Beverly used to say, "When you can't fix people, fix what's around you." She was right. One Friday afternoon, I was at the farmer's market, picking out peaches, when someone tapped my shoulder. It was Lisa. Her eyes looked softer, tired but human again. "Hi, Dad," she said. For a second, words got stuck in my throat. She handed me a jar of homemade jam. "Marcus made it," she added. "He's working at the diner now, cooking." I took the jar heavy and warm in my palm. "Tell him I'm proud of him," I said. She smiled, that same shy smile she used to have when she was 10. "He wanted to tell you himself." Then she nodded toward the truck parked nearby. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, uncertain. We didn't hug. Didn't need to. I just walked over, looked him in the eye and said, "You okay, son?" He nodded slowly. "Trying to be." That was enough. We talked about small things, the weather, the tomatoes, the baby. No lawyers, no trust funds, no ghosts of what had happened. Just two men learning to speak again. Later that evening, I drove home with the windows down, the air thick with summer heat. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of resentment. I just felt the road stretching ahead, quiet, simple, forgiving. At home, I placed the jar of jam next to Beverly's picture. "Looks like they're learning, Bev," I said. "Took them long enough." Outside, the sky turned orange, then purple. Crickets started singing, and the wind carried the smell of rain. I sat on the porch steps, watching the world slow down, thinking how strange it is. The same house that once felt like a prison now felt like a promise. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the hurt, but remembering it without anger. I took a deep breath and whispered, "You can rest easy now, Bev. We're finally okay." The chimes above me swayed in the breeze, their soft sound melting into the evening air. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a train horn blew, long and low, the sound of time moving forward, carrying the last pieces of the past with it. The house was quiet again, but not in the lonely way it used to be. This kind of quiet was peaceful, the kind that lets a man think. After seeing Marcus and Lisa at the market, something inside me settled. The anger had faded, replaced by something softer, something that felt like understanding. That night I sat at Beverly's old writing desk, the one she used to balance bills and scribble grocery lists on. I pulled out a stack of paper and started to write, not to my kids, but to the grandson I hadn't met yet, the little boy from that photo. His face had Beverly's smile. I figured one day when he was old enough to understand, he deserved to know the truth, not the rumors, not the gossip, but the heart of what really happened. I started with the simplest line I could think of. When love and greed meet, one always walks away wounded. Then I wrote everything. About his grandmother, the house we built, the mistakes his father and aunt made, and the lessons I learned when life forced me to stand alone. I didn't want him to grow up thinking family was about inheritance or obligation. I wanted him to know it was about choice, the daily decision to show up, to care, to forgive even when it hurts. Every night for a week I wrote another letter. Some were long, others just a page or two. I sealed each one and labeled them with birthdays. When you turn 10, when you graduate high school, when you fall in love, and finally, when I'm gone. By the end of it, I had a box full of my life, my thoughts, my mistakes, my hope. I placed it in the back of the closet, under Beverly's old quilts. One day, when Marcus was ready, I'd tell him where to find it. The last letter was the hardest to write. I sat there for hours, staring at the blank page before the words came. Don't be afraid to start over. Kid, sometimes losing everything is the only way to see what was real. When I finished, I set the pen down, closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time since Beverly passed, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was leaving something behind, something that mattered. Autumn rolled in slow, turning the trees outside my window into shades of gold and rust. The house creaked a little more these days, and so did I, but for once, that didn't bother me. There's something honest about aging wood and old bones. I both hold the stories they've survived. Most mornings, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and watch the world wake up. The same neighbors walked their dogs. The same mail truck came rumbling down the street. But everything felt new somehow, quieter, clearer. When you stop chasing control, peace finally knows where to find you. Lisa called sometimes now. Nothing deep, just small talk, weather, the baby, recipes Beverly used to make. She always sounded careful, like she was still afraid of breaking something fragile. I never pushed. I just listened. Because sometimes listening is how you love someone who's trying to come back. Marcus hadn't called yet, but I wasn't waiting. The old me would have stared at the phone every night, hoping it would ring. Not anymore. I'd already forgiven him quietly, without needing him to hear it. That kind of forgiveness isn't for them anyway. It's for you. One afternoon I went into the attic, sorting through old boxes. I found Beverly's gardening hat, the one she wore every spring. The smell of her perfume still clung to it, faint but there. I sat on the floor, hat in my hands, and for a second, it felt like she was right beside me. "You'd be proud of them, Bev," I whispered. "They're learning." The sunlight through the attic window hit the dust in the air just right, like golden snow. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the ache in my chest eased. The anger, the grief, the fear, all of it faded into something softer. Acceptance, maybe. That night, I walked out to the backyard and looked at the stars. Somewhere far beyond the dark, I imagined Beverly looking back. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. We'd said it all. In the house, in the years, in the life we built. When I finally went inside, I turned off every light except one, the lamp by her chair. I left it on, just like she used to when she waited for me to come home late from work. Old habits, I guess. But that night it didn't feel like waiting. It felt like gratitude. It's strange how life slows down when you finally stop fighting it. The house is quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that feels earned. There's a soft wind outside, stirring the chimes on the porch. And for once, it doesn't sound lonely. It sounds like home. I sit in Beverly's old chair, the same one she used to knit in, the same one that held her laughter and long silences. On the table beside me sits a photo. Her, me, Marcus, and Lisa. Back when life was simple, and love didn't come with conditions. I trace my finger along the frame, and for a second, I can almost feel her hand on mine again. It's funny. All the years I spent building, saving, protecting, I thought the goal was to keep things safe. But I see it clearer now. It was never about things. It was about keeping love safe. The kind that doesn't fade when people fail you. The kind that waits quietly, even when everything else falls apart. The phone rings, and for once I don't rush to answer. I just let it ring. Some calls can wait. Some goodbyes don't need words. I've said everything I needed to my children, to Beverly, to myself. I stand up and walk to the window. The night sky is wide and full of stars. Somewhere out there, my grandson's asleep, maybe dreaming the way kids do, wild free, untouched by the weight of grown-up mistakes. I hope one day he reads my letters, not to pity me, not to judge his father or aunt, but to understand that truth, real truth, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your heart, waiting to be lived. I turn off the lamp beside Beverly's chair, leaving the house in the glow of the moon. The floor creaks beneath my feet, the same way it always has, and for once, it feels comforting, like an old friend saying good night. Before heading to bed, I whisper, "Good night, Bev, you can rest now." We all can. Outside, the chimes sway one last time, their sound soft and distant, like a story ending not with noise but peace. And in that stillness, I realize something simple. The things we fight hardest to keep are never really gone. They just change shape, turning into memories that live where time can't touch them. That's the truth that stays.